Hello. Before we begin, I would like to thank the guest narrators, Vidith22, Fearcrawler, and Dark Force Creature, for helping me out with this story. Also, I would like to thank the author, Neon Tempo. You guys should definitely check out more of their work. And also, for those of you who don't know, I write all of the music in these videos. So, if throughout the story you hear a song that you like, you can most likely find it somewhere on my channel. With that said, enjoy the video. A few points before we start. Firstly, I'm not the protagonist of this story. I just went to university with her. And though she went on to become a professional writer, I most certainly did not. She'll be taking over from Ron, but until then, please forgive my slightly awkward delivery while I give you guys the necessary context. Secondly, I don't know what you'll make of the following events, and I'm sure many of you might consider it all some sort of hoax. I wasn't present for any of what transpired in Phoenix, Arizona, but I can vouch for the person who wrote the following logs. She is not, and has never been, a fantasist. Okay, so I once knew a girl called Alice Sharma. She was an undergrad at Edinburgh University at the same time I was. Alice Sharma. My educational poison was history, a degree which has greatly benefited my career as a bicycle repairman. Alice Sharma studied journalism, though perhaps studied isn't the word. It's not an exaggeration to say that she lived and breathed the subject. Editor-in-chief of the campus paper, recognizable voice of the student radio. She was frustratingly tunnel-visioned, and she was a journalist in her own right before anyone gave her a professional shot. We met in student halls and became friends almost immediately. A meandering waster trying to stay off of his parents' farm, and an intrepid, ambitious reporter may not seem like the most obvious pairing, but I learned not to question it. She was inspiring and smart, and she proofread all of my essays. I'm not too sure what she saw in me. We were eventually flatmates down in London, where she chased her dreams and I chased my tail. She got a few jobs here and there, but nothing befitting of her skills. After months of fruitless internships and rejections, Alice called a flat meeting, telling us that she was moving to America, accepting a position chasing stories for National Public Radio. The job had come out of the blue, the result of a Hail Mary application she thought had been dismissed out of hand. We threw her a bittersweet going-away party and put the room up for rent. That party was the last time I saw Alice Sharma. She dropped out of contact a few months after her departure. Complete radio silence. I assumed that she was just busy, so I carried on with my small but happy life, and waited for her to pop up on television with some important words below her name. Chief correspondent, senior analyst, something like that. The radio silence was broken last week, and, for reasons you'll learn later on, I'm less happy about it than I would have thought. Arriving home from work, I found a lone email in my otherwise bare inbox. An email that would later be described as suspicious by my tech-literate friends. Despite being born in the early 90s, I didn't own a computer until university, and I've missed several important lessons in the world of cyberspace. Lessons like, don't call it cyberspace, of course, and more importantly, don't open emails with no text, no description, and no sender's address. I realize most of you would have deleted this anonymous blank email immediately. But beyond my basic ignorance about internet safety, something further compelled me to open it. The only thing of substance in the entire message was a zipped folder labeled left.right.as. I don't have to explain what I was hoping those final initials stood for. Opening the zipped folder, I found myself staring at a stack of text files, each one titled with the date, continuing sequentially from the very earliest file of 07/02/2017. I've since read the files a few times and shown them to some friends. They don't know what to make of them either, but they certainly aren't as concerned as me. They think Alice is just in a creative writing phase, and if I didn't know her, I'd have to agree. But the thing is, I do know her. Alice Sharma only cares about the truth, and if that's the case with these files, insane as it may sound, then it's very possible my friend has documented her own disappearance. The people who suggested this forum said you could discuss strange occurrences. If you guys have come across anything to do with what I'm about to tell you, or know any of the people involved, then please send any information my way. Has anyone here heard of the left-right game? Left-right game, draft 07-02, 2017. They say good stories happen to those who can tell them. Robert J. Guthard is an exception to that rule. As I sit at his table, sip his coffee, and listen to him recount the past 65 years, it sounds like he's reading off a shopping list. Every event, his first job, his second wedding, his third divorce, none of it receives more than 1 or 2 sentences. Rob plows through years, the curt, dispassionate curator of his own personal history. Yet the story itself is so fascinating, so rich with moments and so wildly meandering that it somehow stands on its own merits. By the time Rob was 21, he'd gotten married, had a son, and worked as a farmer, a mover, a boat engineer, and grown estranged from his spouse. Here's him talking about that.
Of course, my wife started to get dissatisfied. I was away a while.
For work?
Vietnam.
You were in Vietnam. How was that for you?
Ain't never been back since.
That was everything he had to say concerning his first divorce in the entire Vietnam War. Rob had 4 marriages after that, and even more professions. After the war, he worked with a firm of private detectives, got shot at once by the mob, and then he became a courier, which is how a poor man from Alabama got to see the world.
I've been to most of the continents with that job. I've been to India. You from India?
My mom and dad are from India, yeah.
See, I could tell.
He was arrested once in Singapore, after one of his packages had been found to be full of white powder. He spent 3 days locked up before someone got around to checking the substance. It was chalk. A friend he made during his brief custody, Hiroji Sato, invited Rob to stay with him in Japan. Just getting over the breakup of his 3rd marriage, Rob took the offer. He stayed in Japan for another 5 years.
The Japanese are good people, good manners. But they got all these urban legends and ghost stories that Hiroji was crazy for. Spent all his free time chasing him down. Like, you heard of Joro Gumo?
I don't think so.
Well, she's this spider lady, lives in the Joro Falls around Izu. Meant to be real pretty, but real dangerous. Hiroji took us out there to get a picture of her.
Did you ever meet Jorigumo?
Nah, she didn't show. None of them did. I didn't believe it at all until we went to Aokigahara.
Aokigahara, effectively titled the Suicide Forest, the next stop on Rob's adventure. It's an area of woodland at the base of Mount Fuji, a notorious hotspot for young people looking to take their own lives. Hiroji, Rob's ghost-obsessed jailmate turned best friend, took him to Aokigahara to chase Yori, the ghosts of the forest.
Well, I ain't gonna ask you to believe me, but I was a PI, professional cynic. Even I can't deny there was a spirit in those woods.
From that moment on, Rob's sentences start getting longer. A childlike excitement creeps into his face. I get the distinct feeling we're moving beyond background, beyond Rob Guthard's old life, and towards his new one. The one he wants to talk about. The one that led him to contact the show.
It walked up to me through the trees. Looked like static you see on a TV screen, but it had a human shape almost.
Almost?
It was missing an arm. It reached out to me, but I bolted out of that forest so fast. Hiroji never saw it. Holds it against me to this day.
Hiroji had good reason to be annoyed. Rob says Mr. Sato had been going to the forest 2 or 3 times per year for 3 decades. To have a rookie come along and claim to have seen a Yori in this first trip, I'd be more than a little cranky. But Rob didn't stay rookie for long. In fact, it was in those woods that he discovered his current passion. Or more accurately, the documentation and investigation of urban legends. Legends like Bloody Mary, the Jersey Devil, Sasquatch. Rob has looked into them all.
I figured if one was true, then who knows how many others could be.
How many have you proven so far?
Since Aokigahara? Ain't none of them had any proof to him. Except for one. That's why I called you guys up.
At this point, Rob can't hope to suppress a smile. The left-right game appeared on a paranormal message board in June 2016. Only a few people frequently visited the forums, and of these regulars, only Rob took an interest in the post.
The whole thing had a level of detail you don't see in other stories.
What details grabbed your interest?
Logs, high-quality pictures. The guy documented everything. Said he wasn't going to play the game anymore. I think he wanted somebody to keep investigating.
And you were that somebody?
That's right. I set about trying to verify his information right away.
And how did it go?
Well, it didn't take long to realize the left-right game is the real thing.
The rules of the left-right game are simple. Get in your car, take a drive, take a left, then the next possible road on the right, then the next possible left. Repeat the process ad infinitum until you wind up somewhere new. The rules are easy to understand, but Rob says they're not so easy to follow.
There ain't all that many roads where you can turn left and right and keep going. Most of the time you find yourself at a dead end or needing to turn in the wrong direction. Phoenix is built on a grid system, so you can keep going left and right as long as you need to.
Did you move to Phoenix for the left-right game?
That's right.
I try not to seem incredulous. Selling your house in another state, packing up and moving your whole life to Phoenix, Arizona just to play a game you saw on the internet? Seems like insanity. Rob smiles at me as he reads my expression. I can clearly read his expression too. You'll see, it says. Just wait. I wouldn't have to wait long. Included within the 9-page submission Rob sent our show was a long list of suggested items the chosen reporter should bring with them. Clothes for 3 days, a pocket knife, matches, bandages. There were also a set of qualifications the reporter should have. The ability to drive, basic vehicle maintenance, and its human equivalent, first aid training. He didn't just want to talk about the left-right game. He wanted to take one of us along. Rob leaves a short while later to embark on a few errands, prepping the run, as he calls it. He shows me to the guest room and we part ways, on good terms, but very much aware of the other's poorly veiled opinions. He knew I saw him as a charming obsessive, chasing after a fantasy tale. He saw me as a naive cynic, on the cusp of a new world. All I could think of as I heard the front door close is that tomorrow afternoon, one of us would be right. More after this. When I wake up the next morning, Rob is in my room, holding a tray which he'd knocked on the bottom of to rouse me. I don't manage to record the first part of our conversation.
I got bananas, strawberries, chocolate syrup. We got some more downstairs, but I want you to wake up to something good. We won't be eating this stuff on the road.
Rob has made waffles. He sets them down on the nightstand and talks through the coming day as I eat. I'll admit, it feels a little uncomfortable, waking up in a stranger's home to find said stranger already standing over me, but I quickly move past it. I tell myself that he is an older man, accustomed to living alone in his own house, not usually having to think about boundaries. Anyways, he certainly knows his way around a waffle iron.
Oh, we hit the road at 9. I wanted to give you time to get ready before everyone shows up.
Are there more people coming?
We got a 5-car convoy on the road today. They'll be here in an hour.
This is the first I've heard of a convoy, and to be honest, I'm surprised. The game is Rob's obsession, and I'm here at his request. The idea that anyone else would have an interest in today's drive is a little perplexing. Half an hour later, sated, showered, and dressed in the functional clothing Rob had so painstakingly outlined, I take my pack out to the porch. Rob's already there, waiting for his associates to show up. I thought you'd be conducting a few more errands.
If you ain't prepared by the morning of, you ain't prepared.
Okay, I guess that's fair. Oh, Rob, is the garage locked? The inside door won't budge, and I wanted to mic up the car.
Oh, yeah, it's locked up. I'll open it for you.
Thank you.
Oh, in fact, it's about time I wheeled her out. Oh, fair warning, Miss Sharma. She's a thing of beauty.
To Rob Guthard, beauty took the form of a dark green Jeep Wrangler. Rob climbs in and lets it roll out of the garage, where it dominates every inch of the driveway. The car is large, 4 doors with a roof enclosing the entire compartment. It also has been modified extensively, yet Yet another example of Rob's dedication to the game.
What are you thinking?
I think you're 2 caterpillar treads short of driving a tank.
Huh, yeah. I fixed her up good. I put the winch in, heavy-duty tires. The light rig on top is LEDs. They'll make midnight look like noon, but they don't use hardly any power.
Aren't Jeeps open top usually?
Oh, not all. This is the Unlimited. I like to have a covered car when I head on the road.
I climb in the back, stow my pack. Rob has removed the back seats to afford more storage space. The place is packed to the brim. Jerry cans of gasoline, barrels of water, rope, snacks, and his own neatly packed set of clothes. I wonder if the rest of our convoy would take the game so seriously.
We got Apollo coming up in 10 minutes. No one else has given me a time. I sent the schedule weeks ago. And this always happens.
His name's Apollo?
That's his call sign. Apollo Creed, I think he said.
Why are you using call signs?
Did I not tell you? Oh yeah, we're gonna use call signs on the road. Keep communication clear.
What's your call sign?
Ferryman.
What's my call sign?
I thought about it. I was thinking London. You're from London, right?
I'm from Bristol.
Bristol. That's fine, I guess.
It's less than 10 minutes before Apollo turns the corner. Bob jumps out of his chair and paces briskly to the edge of his property as his first guest pulls up and steps onto the sidewalk. Apollo vaguely resembles his namesake. Dark-skinned, tall, and noticeably well-built, though it's clear he couldn't be less of a fighter. This Apollo Creed is all smiles and seems to have a penchant for laughing at his own jokes. How far have you come?
I've come out of Chicago. Took 3 days hard driving.
And you know Rob from the forums?
Everybody knows Rob. Rob's the god.
Rob walks over to Apollo's car, gesturing him over to talk shop. Rob's clearly impressed with Apollo's choice of vehicle, a blue Range Rover packed to the ceiling with kit. I was more impressed with Rob himself. Somehow, this 65-year-old farmer's son has become respected in a vast online community. My dad is Rob's age. He just discovered copy and paste. The rest don't take long to arrive. 2 Minnesotan librarians, also around Rob's age, pull up in a gray Ford Focus. They're brother and sister, and they've shared ghost hunting as a hobby their entire lives. I find it hard to suppress a smile when they meekly introduce themselves as Bonnie and Clyde. We would have gotten here sooner. We had to drop to get some blankets. Pleasure to meet you, ma'am. Pleasure to meet you, too. Would you be the journalist? That's right. You used to write for the town paper, didn't you? He's talking to his sister there, and she nods. Clyde is clearly the spokesperson for the pair, yet they both seem incredibly shy. Whether they admire the famous outlaws or just the name, it's pretty clear that they couldn't be more different from the real thing. Next to show up are Lilith and Eve, English Lit students at New York University and proprietors of the YouTube channel Paranormicon. Unlike Bonnie and Clyde, Lilith and Eve have no issue holding a conversation. As soon as they learn who I am and what I do for a living, they attempt to conscript me for an expedition to Roswell.
We have a friend there. He's been reading some... He's a seismologist. Yeah, and he's been recording readings over the years that show subterranean movement, predictable movement. We're going to see him in July, but we could work it around you if you're free.
Yeah, I'll have to check my schedule.
Okay, cool. Let me give you my email.
They quickly hurry off to film an intro for their latest video, featuring a quick interview with Rob, who seems to be pretty welcoming of the attention. The last 2 cars arrive within a few seconds of each other. A Lilith, a strong-willed older lady who goes by Blue Jay, and a younger man, going by the call sign Ace. Blue Jay has arrived in a gray Ford Explorer. Ace, much to Rob's annoyance, has arrived in a Porsche.
Did you think that's gonna help on the road? I didn't write that.
It's my car. What am I meant to do? It's my car.
You didn't read my itinerary. You get nothing packed in there.
I did read it. Okay, sir, just calm down. I have a bag. I won't ask you for anything.
Well, I know that's true.
Ace and Rob were off to a bad start. Ace takes a phone call, and despite my best effort to get an interview with Blue Jay, she doesn't seem interested in talking to a journalist. With 5 cars and 7 travelers waiting for the green light, Rob hands out radios and charging packs, then launches into a quick safety briefing. Wear seatbelts, stay in position, communicate clearly and often. It's at this moment I start to feel a little dismay. I like Rob, And clearly, so does everyone else. He'd convinced them all to drive across the country to join him in this game. I start to worry what will happen in the likely event that this whole thing isn't real. Would Rob lose the respect of his peers? Would he accept failure when it comes? After seeing the effort he put into these runs, the next few hours have the potential to be wildly uncomfortable. With a smile and a few encouraging words, Rob ends his briefing and beckons me over to the Wrangler. I clamber inside and make myself as comfortable as possible.
You ready for this, Bristol?
I'm ready.
Okay then, let's hit the road.
The Wrangler pulls out of the driveway, and the convoy follows in order of arrival. Apollo, Bonnie and Clyde, Lilith and Eve, Blue Jay and Ace keep a steady pace behind us as we come up to the first corner. Rob slowly and deliberately turns left, checking on the others in the rearview mirror. He looks back to the road as Ace's Porsche completes the first turn of the game. Shortly afterwards, Apollo checks in on the CB radio.
This is Apollo for Ferryman. How many more to go, Rob?
As many as it takes.
I can tell Rob wanted to reserve the radio for something other than Apollo's quips, but he seems to like Apollo enough to let it slide. I'm not sure Ace would have received the same treatment. We take the next right, and then another left. Now safely assured that everyone's following correctly, Rob speaks his thoughts aloud.
You're wondering the same thing Apollo is.
What do you mean?
You're wondering how many turns we're going to take before we hit some wall or something. Before you find out this is all just a story.
Does that disappoint you?
I'd be disappointed if you weren't thinking something like that. But now we're on the road. I gotta say something and you gotta listen to it.
Okay.
We're coming up to a tunnel soon. Anytime before we reach it, you can get out. Walk in any direction you like, and you won't be in the game no more. Once we go through, you gotta retrace the route we took to get yourself back out that tunnel. That's when you're home. And you gotta convince someone to take you back in a car, cause I ain't ferrying you back 20 minutes in. You got till the tunnel to skip out on this. Understand?
I understand, though I have to say I'm getting a little nervous.
Ain't nothing wrong with a little nervous.
We've taken 23 turns by this point. Already, I feel like we're traversing the city pretty effectively. Rob's heavily modified Wrangler solicits a few impressed glances from passerbys, as well as several honks of respect from other Jeep drivers. Other than those few moments, everything seemed completely indistinguishable from a regular morning drive. I even start to worry if there'll be anything at all for this story. Reporter takes drive with interesting man isn't exactly Pulitzer-worthy. Turn 33 leads us onto a short, unassuming street. A row of small businesses in a quiet Phoenician neighborhood. Liquor, second-hand clothing, tools, and, at the end of the street, a little shop selling antique mirrors. 10 or so people shuffle along the sidewalk, smiling, talking, planning their weekends. The only lone person is a young woman in a gray coat. I briefly glimpse her at the end of the street, standing on our next corner. The back of her coat reflected in 50 old mirrors. Even from a distance, I can see that she's sullen, wide-eyed, and nervous. She shifts constantly on her feet, tugging at the button of her coat. I look away to write some notes as we roll down the street. When I look up again, the woman is standing by my window, staring right at me. A wide, unfaltering grin that seems almost offensive in its complete insincerity.
Lambs at the gate, hoping for something better than clover, when all they find are things worse than slaughter.
Rob, what's happening?
Ignore her.
He wanted to leave me, so I cut him out. The lake was hungry. It drank the wound clean.
Miss, are you all right? The smile vanishes. It snaps from her face, and suddenly the woman is furious.
What do you think you're doing? Have you gone mad?
I reflexively press myself back in my chair as the woman, wild-eyed and grunt, slams her fists against my window with every intent of breaking through.
Would you dance down the lion's tongue? It will shred you, you whore. It will shred you down to your sins, you fucking bastard.
Rob puts his foot down, and the Wrangler rolls defiantly away from the woman. As we turn the corner, I watch her as she retches, her every movement cradled in abject hysterity. She yells despairingly at the rest of the convoy, bursting into tears when the last car passes by her. As she shrinks into the rearview mirror, I see her turn to a large mirror on the side of the shop, which the owner is in the process of polishing. I watch as she walks up to it, and with a convulsant scream, slams her head into the glass. The mirror cracks around her forehead. The owner jumps back in shock as the woman pulls her head from the mirror's surface. The fractured spiderweb is dripping red. It all happens in a split second, and she quickly swerves from my view as we take the next left. Rob, what was that?
She's there sometimes.
On that street?
On the 34th turn.
Who is she?
I don't know. She's never acted out that much before, though.
I find Rob's lack of concern a little unpleasant. As I see it, there are a few explanations for what just happened, and none of them lead to a comforting conclusion. If we had just encountered a bona fide crazy person, then one could argue that Rob is just seeing what he wants to see. Maybe he'd bought into the game's story so much that every strange but explainable occurrence would be rationalized as the next step in his favorite paranormal narrative. Alternatively, the woman could have been an actor. The more elaborate theory, sure, but not unheard of. People have lied to the show before, and Rob was receiving a ton of publicity for this attempt from Lilith, Eve, and I. I admit, Rob didn't seem like a liar, but good liars never do. There's a third alternative, however, an alternative which, if you put your logic aside, explains all the troubling little details that I couldn't help but notice, because as strange as the gray woman was, wasn't it stranger that no one on the street would react? I couldn't recall a single glance in her direction by anybody on the sidewalk. Perhaps that theory falls apart when you consider the shock on the mirror seller's face, but when I think about it, he only reacted once the mirror shattered. And even then, I feel like his attention was on the mirror itself.
Lila to Bristol. Sarah, Eve got that on camera. Do you have audio?
I think it picked her up.
My God, that was so weird. Can you send us the file when we stop? Can you ask ferrymen when we're stopping?
When's our stopping point?
For them, in about 30 minutes. For you, well, you tell me.
Rob turns off a busy street just before a large intersection onto a much quieter stretch of two-lane road. Ahead of us, a road slopes downward, leading into an underpass which disappears into darkness. We'd arrived at the tunnel. What is this supposed to pass under?
Ain't supposed to pass under anything. It's just there.
And if we aren't playing the game?
Then it won't show. The question is, are you playing the game or not?
Rob turns to me. It's the first time he's taken his eyes off the road since we started. He pulls the car to a slow stop at the mouth of the tunnel.
You can get out now, you can go wherever you want to go. But through there, you'll need a car to get yourself home. And like I said, mine ain't turning around for a long time. You understand?
It's a dramatic statement, but unsettling. It doesn't feel like he's attempting to dramatize. It feels like I'm having something genuinely asked of me. Am I ready for what's to come? Do I accept the risks involved? Do I consent to be taken down this road and the next road and the next? Am I prepared to see this game, real or otherwise, to its end? What are you waiting for? Rob smiles and turns back to the road. He picks up the CB radio and holds down the button on the side. The microphone cracks.
This is ferryman to all cars. Anyone want to step out? Then pull to the side now. Otherwise, stay in formation and have supplies at hand. We got a long ways to go.
Much like the game I'm so tentatively playing, my view of Robert J. Guthard seems to change direction frequently. I'd heard all about his life, but I'm sure that I know him. I like the guy, but I'm not certain I trust him. And though I admire his dedication to the left-right game, I'm not sure where it might lead us. Yet, as he takes us into the tunnel, his face vanishing and reappearing under the dim sodium light, I can tell he expects this trip to be a major step in his already impressive story. And this time, For better or worse, I'm along for the ride. The left-right game, Draft 1, 08, 02, 2017. The next turn comes immediately after the tunnel. We'd been in the dimly lit passage for almost 2 minutes, but at the pace Rob likes to travel, it's hard to figure out how far we've actually gone. When we descended into the underpass, we were just nearing the outskirts of Phoenix. Scrutinizing the rearview mirror as we leave, it's fair to say we aren't that much farther out. Everything else, the temperature, the time of day, the weather, all seems exactly like it had been before we ventured into the tunnel. I'm not sure what I was expecting, of course, but it certainly doesn't feel like we're anywhere new. The tunnel itself had been similarly underwhelming, especially considering the importance Rob seemed to place on it. In fact, the only thing of true interest since we passed through was something Rob said once we hit the halfway mark. As the tunnel's mouth loomed towards us, Rob picked up the CB radio transceiver and issued a casual warning to the convoy. The message itself was straightforward. His choice of words, however, was curious. I decided to ask him about it. Rob, just a second ago, when you told us the next exit was coming up, why did you use the word trap? I have it in my notes. You said, folks, we're coming up to the end soon. First little trap's coming up. Our next turn is sharp left as we leave. Look out for it. Is there a reason you used the word trap?
Just one of those things. Fellow who wrote all the original logs, he liked to think the road would try and trick you into making a wrong turn. Small roads off large highways, roads obscured from view, sharp turns like this one.
He thought the road was trying to deceive him?
Yeah, pretty much. I gotta say I agree with the guy.
By this point, we've taken the offending corner and the next right a little further on. I can't help but feel that Rob is reading a great deal into what is, essentially, an abrupt turn in an ordinary road. The level of conspiracy he's able to place behind such a simple thing, going as far as to ascribe some mischievous quality to the asphalt itself. It's hard to take seriously. In fact, I'm starting to wonder less about whether Rob can convince me this game is real, and more about whether I'd ever be able to convince him that it isn't. Perhaps this story will be less about where a magic roadway goes after a few zigzagging turns, and more about where the human mind can go if it invests too heavily into an idea. To his credit, Rob has noted my cynicism. He even seems to welcome it, but if our current surroundings are supposed to convince me, then he's going to find me more cynical than he anticipated. Rob keeps his hands on the wheel and his eyes on the road. Any attempt at an interview receives a pleasant but curt response. He's not being evasive. His attention is just elsewhere. Before I know it, half an hour has gone by without Rob speaking a word. Seems like a large part of the left-right game involves driving in complete silence. Once again, I'm not sure what to expect, but it's certainly not been an earth-shattering start. At least it gives me some time to type up my notes.
Ferryman to all cars. We stop here.
An uneventful hour and a half passed since we left the tunnel. I didn't notice Rob pick up the receiver, but before I know it, the Wrangler has pulled up to the side of the road, leaving a large space behind us for the rest of the convoy to park up. The buildings are getting few and far between. It won't be long until we're in the desert proper. With this in mind, I assume Rob is simply stopping to let everyone drink up.
This is when he
I
tells
probably
us.
shouldn't assume when it comes to Rob Guthard.
This is when he tells us.
Definitely a rest stop. Rob also has some important
This is when he
words for
tells
the
us
crew.
to give him our money,
He
right?
gathers us around in a rough semicircle, talking while we eat our provisions.
Now, I mentioned in the emails that at certain points on this trip, you'd all need to do some things just because I say so. This is one of those times. Y'all understand?
This is when he tells us to give him our money, right, Rob?
Yes. We got to know what it is, right?
This is when he tells us to give him our money, right, Rob?
Yeah, I'd rather know what's going on.
And I don't intend on keeping anything from you. I just want to be clear that across this next stretch, you need to follow my orders to the letter.
We get it. Just tell us already. Rob takes a few moments, perhaps to lend gravity to his point, perhaps to swallow some barbed words intended for an increasingly impatient Ace. When he does speak, it's in a measured and serious tone. He's clearly adamant that we have to take his words on board.
For about half an hour, the next 13 turns, we'll be going one by one. We travel in order of formation. Me and Bristol will go first, then I'll radio the next car to follow. When you reach the Jeep, you park behind me. Then we keep going as normal.
Rob takes a deep breath in. When he starts up again, his speech is even more pointed than before.
There's a hitchhiker on the road, a well-dressed man with a case. You pick him up. You take him where he needs to go. You do not, under any circumstances, talk to the man. To be safe, don't look at him. Don't take anything he offers you. Don't open the door for him or wave goodbye when he leaves. You do not acknowledge him in any way. You want my advice? Don't say a word till you get to the stopping point.
Why do we have to go one by one?
Guy who wrote all the logs says he don't like choosing cars. I don't know what that means, but I'm lucky I never had to find out.
Why don't we just not pick him up?
That isn't an option.
Well, I mean, yeah, it is. I don't see why we...
God damn it! You'll pick him up, whether you want to or not.
The group is silent. This is the first time Rob's raised his voice. In an ensuing stillness, Ace looks like he'd be more than happy to turn his car around and retrace the road back to Phoenix, leaving Rob in the dust with a few choice words. I can sympathize with him a little. Rob's been treating him as an annoyance, a tag-along who didn't do the homework. But at the end of the day, Ace is doing nothing to fix things. Also, Rob is essentially right. He didn't do the homework. Deciding he has nothing more to say to us, Rob marches over to the Wrangler. Bonnie, Clyde, Apollo, and Eve sit on the floor sharing snacks. Ace loses himself in his phone, and Blue Jay, still maintaining a noticeable distance from the group, takes to her car with a copy of US Weekly.
Bristol, can we talk?
I turn around to see Lilith holding her cell phone with the screen facing me. Yeah, sure, what's up?
Have you tried to make any calls since we came through the tunnel?
No, not yet. Why?
Could you try?
I pull out my own cell and dial into the office. The line's busy, which isn't exactly uncommon. Lilith watches intently, waiting for a reaction. I'm not getting through.
They were busy?
Yeah, why?
Everyone is. We have signal, we can make calls, but everyone on the other end is busy.
Don't you think it could just be a coincidence?
I really mean everyone, Bristol. While Eve's been driving, I've been calling. My camera's automated support line, 911.
You dialed 911?
For science, yeah. All of them are busy. I even called this guy at my dorm who has a serious thing for me, and trust me, he's not fucking busy. This is weird, right? It's like we've crossed a threshold and the world's suddenly doing something else. You know?
In all honesty, I'm not sure I do. I don't want to say it, but it seems like a massive stretch. Luckily, Rob saves me from commenting when he calls me over to the car, clearly eager to get back on the road. I tell Lilith we'll look into her discovery on the other side, and she nods in agreement, retreating to her friend and immediately stealing a handful of apple slices. I climb into the Wrangler and wave goodbye to the convoy. We slowly roll back onto the road and set off on our way. Watching the rest of the group disappear in the background, I feel noticeably more isolated despite Rob's presence. Or perhaps because of it. I'm not exactly sure. The hitchhiker shows up about 10 minutes later. Just like Rob said, the man is incredibly well dressed, in a well-fitting brown suit with a dark green tie. Even from a distance, I can see his shoes are expertly shined, as is the varnished wooden casing resting on the floor beside them. He stands on the side of the road and raises his hands gingerly, wearing a look of hopeful anticipation. Who is he?
The hitchhiker.
Is that really all you're going to say?
It's all I can say. You understand the rules here?
Don't talk to him.
I'd say don't talk at all. Not until we stop. When we stop, we're safe.
Rob veers slowly over to the side of the road. The hitchhiker smiles appreciatively, grasping his hands together and shaking them in thanks. Picking up his case, he strolls over to the Wrangler whilst unbuttoning his blazer. See you on the other side. The back door opens, and the hitchhiker pulls himself into the storage area, finding no seating. He settles himself cheerfully on some of the softer luggage just behind me. Not much in the way of seating back here, huh? I'll have to admit, I do feel a subtle urge to respond, even after the stern warnings I've received. To ignore the man seems almost instinctively rude. I was raised British after all.
So, where are you all from? I'm traveling from Oakwell.
I glance at him in the rearview mirror. He meets my gaze and smiles. I flick my attention back to the road, counting the white lines. The stranger persists in trying to start a conversation. 10 minutes go by, and the silence grows palpable, broken intermittently by yet another cheerful attempt at conversation. Topics include what nice weather we're having, our professions, our hobbies. In response, I busy myself with pointless but occupying tasks. I find myself playing games in my head, thinking of common phrases and making them into clunky anagrams. It seems to work, and after a short while, I start to habituate to the man's small talk. I almost don't notice that he's there. Maybe that's what allows him to catch me out.
You're just a fucking disappointment, aren't you?
It's sharp, venomous, completely divorced from the idle questioning I'd been tuning out. I'm daydreaming when I hear it, and before I can register what I'm doing, I'm turning to face him. My lips are already parting as I go, a reflexive thought, reflexively vocalized. What? I almost say it out loud. The word is on the edge of my tongue, a single note my vocal cords were all but ready to play. Only the sudden, vice-like grip of Rob's hand on my forearm anchors me in the moment. I stare at the hitchhiker, my mouth still open. He's different now. All the warmth, all the pleasantry is drained from his face like running makeup. His smile is malevolent, calculating, and finally, it feels honest.
You want to know things? I can tell you.
Rob keeps his eyes focused on the road, but his grip on my arm tightens.
I can tell you everything you want to know, even the things you never knew about yourself, even the thoughts you didn't know you were thinking, those little critters all the way at the back.
We stare at each other a moment longer, before I turn around and back to the road. I don't count the white lines anymore. Now I'm focused intently on anything our passenger has to say. For the next 10 minutes, ignoring him is going to have my full attention. He only tries a few more times, reverting back to more innocent questioning. Nothing takes. 5 minutes later, he indicates to a seemingly random point at the side of the road, and Rob drops him off. The man thanks us, climbs neatly out, puts down his case and waves as we depart. When we disappear around the next corner, he still hasn't stopped. Surprisingly, the silence caused by the hitchhiker's presence isn't nearly as intense as the one left in his wake. I decide to break the tension, somewhat ungracefully.
To be fair, we are having nice weather.
Don't talk.
Are you mad at me? I'm sorry, he got me. I wasn't expecting.
You did fine. We don't talk till we stop.
I go back to my notes, making a point to write down my current feelings. For the record, embarrassed but relieved. Once I put the words down on the paper, however, I feel something else. Confusion mixed with concern, because at the end of the day, what was I relieved about? That I didn't talk to a strange man who had tried to talk to me? Was anything really at stake? The more I think about it, the more I realize that the entire episode with the mysterious hitchhiker reduces the left-right game to two possible states. Either it's real, or it's an elaborate hoax perpetuated by Robert J. Guthard. The crazy woman, the tunnel, the malicious left turn, all of those could be explained as rationalizations, but the hitchhiker was far too elaborate, far too difficult to predict. If he was an anchor, then Rob is nothing more than an impressive fraud. If he was genuine, then I'm not entirely sure where that leaves us. Something in the corner of my eye pulls me from my thoughts, a transient, peripheral object that almost completely passes me by before I turn in a weak attempt to catch it. I only get a few seconds to look before it's gone from my field of view. I faced forward once more, sit back in my chair, and let Rob carry us even further down the road. It's not long before we finally pull over.
You did good. I'm sorry for grabbing you. I just didn't want you to do something you'd regret.
No, it's fine. I was going to... Do you know what happens if you talk to him?
Not sure. Came close myself once, a few years back. The way he looks at you when he thinks he's got you, I don't think I want to know.
Rob, I saw something a few minutes ago. I don't know if you noticed it.
I'm afraid I had my eyes forward most of the time.
There was a car on the side of the road. It had crashed off the bank. Have you seen that before?
I ain't never seen that, but random stuff sometimes shows up here and there.
Have people other than you run the left-right game?
No one I know of. Whoever it was, they'd probably just rather crash than face that damn hitchhiker again.
He's there on the way back, too?
If you're unlucky.
Well, something to look forward to.
Rob picks up the CB radio and messages for Apollo to set off, repeating his warnings concerning the hitchhiker. I feel like everyone's going to get a similar speech before they embark. Ace will probably get it twice. Half an hour later, Apollo shows up, though he laughs about the ordeal. He's clearly a little shaken.
Guy should call himself an Uber. He can't shut those guys up. Do you guys have Uber in England?
Yeah.
Then you know what I mean, right?
Bonnie and Clyde arrive quicker than Apollo. They pull up at the back. Clyde helps Bonnie out of the car and they proceed to stretch their legs. Once Apollo joins them, it's clear that everyone has a different story to tell. The hitchhiker offered Clyde travel suites, pleasantly but firmly insisting he take one. Apollo almost got talking about his music tastes after the hitchhiker asked to play something on the radio. That particular story does leave me curious about whether we still get NPR on this road. Rob customarily greets Bonnie and Clyde, then walks off to signal Eve and Lilith. He's still sitting in the Jeep when I meet him at the door.
Hey, what are you up to?
Just waiting by the phone. The girls are on their way. You need anything?
Maybe. I think Apollo's been affected by the whole hitchhiker thing a bit more than he's letting on.
Seems just fine to me.
I'm not so sure. He's only smiling when people are nearby. Could you talk to him?
Well, I ain't much comfort. I got 4 ex-wives to tell me that. Think it might be better coming from you?
I think this is a man-to-man conversation. I might just get a brave face.
Last man-to-man conversation I had, my son didn't talk to me for 3 months.
Rob doesn't look comfortable, but he acquiesces, climbing out of the car. I watch him wander over to Apollo, who is standing by his Range Rover, staring into his phone. Rob puts a hand on the man's shoulder, from a distance. It's actually a sweet moment. I start to feel bad for lying to him. I carefully open the driver's side door and climb into the Wrangler, assuming I have around 20 seconds before Rob comes back. Picking up the CB receiver, I stare at the list of presets labeled 1 through 9. I don't know which button I press to talk to Eve and Lilith, and I certainly don't have time to call everyone up. Rob handed us all a transceiver before we left. It's what he's been making all the car bulletins with. Preset 1 puts him in touch with the receiver in each car. I've seen that in practice enough times. The rest of the presets must access transceivers individually, and if Rob is the man I think he is, he gave our radios out in order of position. If that's the case, then either Rob or I could be preset 2, Apollo would be next, then Bonnie and Clyde. Without knowing where Rob has placed himself in the queue, the only option which would guarantee me getting through to Lilith and Eve would be preset 7. I think that makes sense. With no time to check my work, I press the button and snap up the receiver.
This is Bristol to Lilith and Eve. Are you guys there?
The receiver cracks quietly. I look in the wing mirror and see Rob making awkward small talk with Apollo. Perhaps his 4 ex-wives were onto something.
Lilith to Bristol. How is it on the other side? We haven't seen a hitchhiker. Oh, by the way, I just phoned Eve and it went through. Could I have your number to test just to see if it works?
Sorry, Lilith. I'm phoning about something else.
Why? What's going on over there?
Apollo's nodding to Rob. I can imagine him making assurances that he's perfectly fine. I really don't have long at all.
I have a mission for you, but you have to keep it a secret.
Sounds awesome. What's up?
Once you're past the hitchhiker, there's a crashed car on the road on the passenger side. Whilst you're going past it, would you mind getting some footage?
What sort of footage?
Just zoom in and get as much detail as possible. You don't need to stop, just anything will be useful.
Rob starts walking back to the car. I shift into the passenger seat, still holding the receiver.
Was there anything specific you wanted me to?
Talk to me later, not now. Thank you, bye. I slam the receiver into the holster a moment before Rob opens the door. He shrugs at me.
He seems fine. Unless there's something he ain't telling me.
The rest of the day is fairly uneventful. Lilith and Eve pull up, beaming about their experience with the hitchhiker and bragging about what the dashcam footage would mean for their channel. Lilith ends her story by insisting that nothing else happened for the rest of her journey. whilst directing a highly intentional look in my direction. I look away and make a mental note to catch up with her when less people are around. Blue Jay seems the least fazed by her run-in with the hitchhiker. We do manage to get a few words out of her, though perhaps a few is an exaggeration. After which, she goes and sits down on her own. When Ace pulls up on the side of the road, he almost falls out of his car. His legs are weak, his face is gaunt, his breaths are quick and shallow. I try to get him to talk about it on tape, but he shrugs me off, eager to hear about where we're going rather than talk about where we've been. We travel for a while longer, now at around 486 turns, and nearing our first night on the road. Rob signals our stopping point. A quiet clearing at the top of a hill. Rob clears a sleeping area in the back of the Wrangler, leaving a line of luggage as a barrier to separate us. I appreciate the thought, but don't really know how to tell him. In the end, I just say,
Thanks for making room.
Apollo attempts to keep everyone from going to bed, issuing vague statements about making a fire, but people quickly shuffle off to their cars. The early start and the subsequent events of the day have taken their toll. I watch Lilith and Eve break away from the group and head to bed. I suppose I'll have to talk to them tomorrow morning when Rob isn't around. I still feel a bit bad for lying to him and putting Lilith and Eve into what could be a blatant act of dumb paranoia. Rob seems like a good man, a reasonable man, as flawed as any of us, but fundamentally decent. But the fact remains that when I talked to him about the crashed car, he clearly said,
No one I know of. Whoever it was, they'd probably just rather crash than face that damn hitchhiker again.
I want to trust Rob. I want to believe him when he says he didn't see the car, that he'd never seen a car on that stretch of road, but for a man of so few words, he might have said too much. If he truly never saw the car, how did he know the direction it was facing? I make all my notes concerning this subject on paper and in shorthand, in which I'm hoping, in Rob's long and varied life, he hasn't inexplicably learned to read. Long after Rob's gone to bed, I stay in the passenger seat, typing up my thoughts of the day.
That was Sister Moon by Leslie Estrada, another song to calm you folks down as we head into the evening. It's Chuck Greenwald, and I'm with you till the witching hour.
I decided to put the radio on in the end. I was curious, and also wanted the company. I turned the volume way down so the noise wouldn't reach Rob, and searched around for something to have in the background.